I heard a scream before I saw the gun. My disabled daughter was sitting on the playground swing, happy and smiling, enjoying her day like any child should. Then Karen came marching in, her HOA badge swinging, anger all over her face. "She can't be here," she yelled. "This playground is not for kids like her. Take her away now." My wife tried to speak, her voice shaking. "She's just a child. She isn't hurting anyone." But Karen didn't listen. She pulled out a gun and fired a shot. My daughter froze on the swing, tears rolling down her cheeks. She hugged her stuffed cat tight and shook with fear. Karen smirked like she owned the world, but she had no idea who she was, just scared. The little girl she tried to bully is the daughter of the police chief. Before you hear how it all happened, comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more real HOA stories that show what happens when power goes too far. I heard the scream before I saw anything. It echoed across the playground like someone had suddenly torn the piece in half. The day had started calm and ordinary. Children played on swings and slides, parents watched from benches, and the sky was bright blue like it always promises a peaceful afternoon. My disabled daughter sat on the swing, holding her stuffed cat close, smiling at the way the wind touched her face. Her wheelchair sat right beside her, and my wife gently pushed her back and forth, giving her the tiny moments of freedom she loved more than anything. She couldn't run like other kids, couldn't chase a ball or climb a slide, but she could feel happiness in her own way, and that was enough for us. Then Karen stormed in. Her heels clicked hard against the playground path. She wore her HOA badge like it was a crown and her anger like a coat. Her face was sharp with frustration even before she opened her mouth, like she had brought her rage from home and was waiting to release it on someone. "She can't be here," she shouted, pointing at my daughter as if she wasn't a child but a problem to remove. "This playground isn't for kids like her. Take her away right now." Parents froze. Swings slowed. A mother held her toddler closer. Everyone knew Karen's voice. Everyone knew she liked control. But nobody expected her to yell at a disabled child. My wife tried to stay calm, tried to protect our daughter with her voice before she had to use her body. "She's a child," she said, voice shaking but firm. "She isn't bothering anyone. She's allowed to play like everyone else." Karen's eyes narrowed like kindness was a language she refused to understand. She stepped closer, hands on her hips, acting like the playground was hers and we were trespassing on her land. "She does not belong here," she repeated, louder, angrier. "Move her, or I will make sure she never comes here again." My daughter looked confused. She didn't understand hatred, only tone. Her smile faded slowly, replaced by the small trembling of her lip. She hugged her stuffed cat tighter, eyes shiny with fear she didn't know how to explain. The swing stopped moving on its own. The world felt like it was holding its breath. Then Karen reached into her bag, and everything inside me tensed. When she pulled out the gun, time seemed to slow. Her hand shook slightly, not out of fear but out of wild frustration and ego. She lifted it and fired a shot into the air. The sound exploded across the playground. Birds scattered, parents screamed, children cried. My wife grabbed my daughter instantly, pulling her from the swing, hugging her close like she could shield her from the whole world. My daughter sobbed, tears rolling down her cheeks as she hid her face against her stuffed cat, shaking all over. Karen smirked like she had won something, like she had just proven she was the queen of this small neighborhood universe. In her head, she wasn't a woman who scared a child. She was someone who demanded control and believed fear meant victory. But she didn't know who she had just threatened. I stood up from the bench where I had been quietly watching my family play. I walked toward her slowly, every step filled with controlled anger. I didn't run. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. Some truths are louder than screams. My badge was under my jacket, but my presence alone was enough to make some parents whisper my name, not in fear, in relief. The police chief was here. Karen finally noticed me moving toward her. Her smirk faltered for a second, unsure if she should feel proud or intimidated. But she didn't put the gun away. She still thought she had power. She still believed she could get away with treating children like enemies and mothers like obstacles. She didn't know the truth yet. She didn't know the child she just terrified. The little girl with tears in her eyes and a stuffed animal clutched against her heart was my daughter. And the father she had just challenged wasn't just another parent on the playground. He was the man responsible for law, for safety, for justice in this town. I stopped just a few steps away from her, my voice steady, controlled, sharp enough to cut the moment in half. "Put the gun down," I said calmly. Her smirk faded completely. Her fingers twitched. The playground was silent, except for my daughter softly crying into her mother's arms. This moment wasn't about loudness. It was about truth. She thought she could play with fear. She thought her power came from shouting and weapons and titles on a badge that meant nothing. She didn't realize real power comes from protection, not control, from dignity, not anger. And she was about to learn. My voice stayed steady, even though every part of me burned to react faster. Years of training had taught me that strength is not in shouting or rushing, but in knowing exactly when to move and when to wait. Karen did not understand that kind of strength. She only understood noise and force. She held her gun stiffly, still raised, but I could see her confidence shaking a little now. Fear? Maybe, or shock that someone dared to stand up to her. "You don't get to decide who belongs here," I said, taking one slow step closer. My tone didn't rise, it didn't need to. "This is a public playground. That means all children belong here, including mine." Karen's lips tightened. She was used to shouting people down, not facing someone who refused to bend. She jabbed a finger toward me angrily. "People like you think you can break rules and ruin neighborhoods. I won't let it happen." "People like me?" I asked quietly. She blinked, suddenly unsure if she should continue. Then she doubled down. "Yes. People who don't follow HOA standards. People who bring problems into good communities." Behind me, my daughter cried harder, a soft trembling sound that cut through every inch of my patience like a blade. My wife whispered to her, trying to calm her shaking shoulders. A few children nearby clung to their parents, staring at Karen with wide, fearful eyes. Even the wind felt still, as if waiting to see what would happen next. "You fired a weapon near children," I reminded her. "That isn't a rule of any neighborhood. That's dangerous and illegal." Karen waved the gun slightly, as if swatting my words away. "It was just a warning. I didn't shoot at anyone. I was making a point. That point could have cost someone their life," I responded. "And right now, you are still holding a gun in a public place full of families. Put it down." She laughed, but it sounded weak, forced. Her voice cracked at the end. "You don't scare me. I am the HOA president. I decide what's safe here." "That's where you're wrong," I answered. "Safety is my responsibility, and it always will be." Her eyes flickered. Confusion slid into them like a shadow creeping under a door. She didn't understand yet, but she felt something, a shift in power she hadn't expected. She lifted her chin and scoffed. "You're just another loud parent. You don't control anything here." I reached to my belt slowly, deliberately, not touching my firearm, but the radio. My fingers pressed the button, voice low, steady as stone. "Dispatch, officer at playground, requesting immediate backup. Armed civilian refusing to put weapon down." Karen's face changed instantly. Her shoulders stiffened. Her mouth opened, then closed, like she suddenly forgot how to breathe. "Officer," she repeated quietly. I didn't look away from her. "Yes. So, I'll ask again. Put the gun down." She shook her head slightly, stunned. "You're lying. You're trying to scare me." "If I wanted to scare you," I said calmly, "I would have raised my voice already." A hush fell. The words sank in slowly like drops of water turning into thunder in her mind. She looked around like she was trying to find support but saw only parents staring back, holding their children tightly, eyes cold and angry. People she thought admired her no longer recognized her power, only her cruelty. My daughter sniffed behind me, trying to breathe through tears. That soft sound did more to fuel my resolve than anything else ever could. I kept my eyes on Karen. "You frightened my child, and every child here," I continued. "That alone is unacceptable. But using a firearm to do it? That crosses a line that law does not forgive." Karen's hand trembled. For the first time, fear reached her eyes. "I didn't know," she whispered, voice suddenly fragile. "You didn't know she was my daughter?" I asked. She nodded, swallowing nervously. "I wouldn't have done it if I knew." I cut her off sharply. "You shouldn't care whose child she is. You should care that she is a child." Silence fell again. This time it was heavy, powerful, undeniable. Every parent there felt the truth in it. Karen lowered the gun slightly, breathing fast, but she didn't drop it. She still clung to her control like a lifeline, even as it slipped from her fingers. "This isn't fair," she whispered, anger returning in a thin, shaking line. "You can't make me look like the villain. I was defending the neighborhood." "You were threatening innocent people," I answered. "You scared a disabled child. That's not defense. That's abuse of power." My radio crackled softly, backup responding. "Units en route, ETA 3 minutes. Karen heard it too. Her face paled. She looked around again, desperate. But not one parent stepped forward to support her. The world she controlled with HOA letters and loud complaints suddenly felt very small and very weak. I kept my voice soft so it cut deeper. "Put the gun down while this ends quietly. Or hold it and let this end the hard way. The choice is yours." Her fingers shook. Her breath went uneven. She looked at the frightened children, at my daughter's tear-streaked cheeks, at the badge clipped to my hip suddenly visible as my jacket shifted. Realization settled, heavy, final. Her arm lowered, slowly. I didn't reach for her. I didn't rush. I waited, because power wasn't hers anymore. It never had been. It belonged to truth, and to the ones who protect, not control. She stood frozen, holding the gun loosely now, as if it suddenly weighed as much as her wrong decisions. And the sirens in the distance grew louder, closer, ready to close the chapter she had written with arrogance and ended with fear. Everything was no longer in her hands. It was in mine, and I knew exactly what to do next. Sirens grew louder, and the tension around us thickened like heavy summer air before a storm. Karen's arm hung at her side now, the gun loose in her hand like she finally realized it had never given her power, only exposed her fear. The flashing red and blue lights painted the playground edges, washing across swings and benches, across parents holding children close, across my wife's shaking shoulders as she held our daughter tight to her chest. 2 patrol cars pulled up beside the curb. Doors opened quickly, but not panicked. Officers stepped out with calm urgency, hands ready but not raised, eyes scanning the scene with trained focus. They saw the gun first, then saw me standing there, still steady, still between Karen and my family. Karen stiffened, grip tightening again, not in aggression but in panic. She tried to hide the gun behind her back, as if invisibility could erase reality. An officer was already speaking, voice firm and clear. "Ma'am, put the weapon down. Hands visible." Karen tried to laugh, but her voice cracked. This is a misunderstanding. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I only fired once. It wasn't aimed at them. I was just warning them." The officer raised an eyebrow, expression hardly amused. "Warning who? A child?" Karen's mouth opened and closed again. Her legs shifted, as if she wanted to back away, but her pride pinned her in place like nails in wood. I stood still, watching her wrestle with her own disbelief that her actions had consequences. She looked at me suddenly, eyes flooded with anger and fear tangled together. "He's lying!" she burst out, pointing toward me with shaking fingers. "He's protecting his troublemaker kid. They don't respect rules. They don't fit here." My daughter whimpered softly into my wife's shoulder at the word troublemaker, and my jaw clenched. I stayed calm, not because I didn't feel rage, but because real strength doesn't shake when faced with weakness pretending to be authority. One of the officers turned toward me then, eyes widening in recognition. "Chief," Karen froze like ice water had been poured on her spine. Her eyes snapped between me and the officer, searching for some last hope that she hadn't just dug her own grave with arrogance and ignorance. The officer's voice softened a fraction toward me, but his body remained squared in duty. "Sir, is everything okay? Do you need us to take lead?" I nodded slightly, gaze never leaving Karen. She fired a gun near children. Intimidation, endangerment, reckless discharge of a firearm. Karen's breath came in shallow bursts, like she suddenly couldn't get enough air. "See, Chief?" she squeaked. The title sounded foreign and heavy in her mouth, like she didn't believe it could be real. She blinked rapidly. You're the police chief?" "I am," I answered, voice steady, unmoved by her shock. "And that child you frightened is my daughter." Her face twisted, first disbelief, then regret, then anger again, because admitting wrong felt like losing. She pointed at my daughter, hands trembling. I didn't know, she insisted. If I knew she was yours, I wouldn't. That's the problem, I cut in sharply. You shouldn't need to know whose child she is to treat her with respect. Murmurs rippled through the parents behind us. Heads nodded. Eyes narrowed at Karen, no longer confused about who she was, only why they ever tolerated her leadership in the neighborhood. She backed away a step, then another, like the world suddenly felt too tight around her. She touched my property. Karen tried again, voice rising in desperation. I was enforcing rules. You pointed a loaded firearm at a family, an officer replied quietly. That's not enforcement, that's a crime. Karen's breath faltered. It wasn't aimed at them. It was a warning. A warning to a disabled child, I asked. That's your defense? Silence stretched like a rope pulled tight. Karen shook her head slowly, like she wished she could rewind time, reset her steps, swallow her own words. But the world had already heard them. The officers moved closer now, not aggressive, but firm, prepared. She tried to back away one more step, but there was nowhere left to run. Her world, once full of certainty and power she believed she owned, had shrunk to a tiny circle around her feet, too small to hold her ego. Ma'am, the officer said gently but without sympathy, place the weapon on the ground and step back. Karen's fingers curled tightly around the gun, as if letting go meant losing the last piece of control she had ever known. But she looked at me again, saw nothing but unshakable certainty in my stance, and something inside her crumbled. Her hand lowered shakily. Slowly she crouched, placing the gun on the playground surface. It hit the rubber flooring with a dull sound that felt heavier than metal. It felt like truth finally landing. She lifted her hands, palms outward, voice trembling. I didn't mean to. I didn't think. That's clear, I answered. Thinking wasn't something you brought with you today. Her face twisted, a flicker of shame pushing past pride. She swallowed hard. I wasn't going to hurt her, she whispered, though no one believed it anymore, not even her. Your intentions don't erase your actions, I replied, and your fear doesn't excuse your cruelty. The officers cuffed her wrists gently, not manhandling her. Professional, respectful, the way law is supposed to be carried out, even when dealing with someone who failed to show respect to others. Karen's shoulders slumped as they guided her toward the patrol car. Parents exhaled slowly, tension draining from the air. Some held their children a little tighter. My wife turned, tears falling freely now that danger had passed, and she wrapped her arms around our daughter like she never wanted to let go. I walked to them and knelt, placing my palm softly on my daughter's back. She shook in quiet sobs, face buried in fur and fabric. I whispered something only she could hear, voice soft and certain. You're safe. Daddy's here. The officer paused with Karen beside the car, watching us with a quiet look of respect. Karen watched too, but her face showed something else. Realization, maybe for the first time, that fear is not power and control is not leadership. For the first time since she arrived, she stayed silent. For the first time, she seemed small in the place she once believed she ruled. And as the car door opened behind her, finality settling in the air, there was no smirk left to hide behind. Her world of fake authority had been replaced by real accountability, and this was only the beginning. Karen sat in the back of the patrol car now, but the door wasn't closed yet. The officers were still talking quietly, gathering statements, writing notes, making sure every detail was handled the right way. The flashing lights bounced across the playground in soft pulses, red and blue washing over the swings, the grass, and the tiny rubber pieces under the slide. The world around us felt lighter, but not settled yet, not finished. I stayed by my wife and daughter. My daughter clung to me with small trembling hands, pressing her face into my chest as if hiding inside my shirt could erase everything she had just seen. Her stuffed cat sat squished between us, fur damp with tears. My wife rubbed her back slowly, whispering soft, calming words, voice tired but full of love. Every stroke of her hand was gentle, steady, healing. The parents in the playground slowly stepped forward after a moment of quiet, one by one. Some came with cautious steps, others with determined ones. Their faces held anger, relief, and something else, support, real support. Not the pretend kind people give when it costs them nothing, but the kind that appears when truth stands tall and people finally see which path they should stand on. A man holding his toddler approached first. He looked at me, eyes serious. "I recorded the whole thing," he said. "If you need it for evidence, you can have it." I nodded, grateful without needing to say the words. He understood. Sometimes thanks don't live in speech, they live in silence and eye contact. A woman with a stroller spoke next. "We all saw her. She kept complaining about your daughter before. It wasn't the first time she tried to chase you away." She pointed toward Karen inside the patrol car. "None of us ever thought she would go this far." "I know," I said quietly, "but now there's proof she did." The officer nearest us watched, listening, taking names gently. He wasn't rushing anyone. This wasn't just a report anymore. It was a neighborhood waking up. Another mother stepped forward, trembling with outrage. "She told my son he couldn't play here last week because he made too much noise." Her hands shook on the stroller handle. "We thought she was just strict. But this," she looked toward the police car, "this is something else. It always begins small. Authority misused in little doses, disguised as rules, disguised as order, disguised as for the good of the neighborhood. Then one day the mask cracks and the truth steps out heavy and cold." A younger father shook his head. "I used to vote for her in HOA meetings," he admitted shamefully. "I thought she cared about safety." His voice faltered. "Turns out she cared about control." That was when the door of the patrol car opened and one officer stepped back toward us. Karen looked out, still cuffed, still frozen, eyes glossy and lost. She wasn't yelling now, wasn't arguing. Silence had replaced her power. Fear had taken the place where arrogance once lived. She stared at me like I was the reason her world had fallen apart. Not her decisions, not her cruelty, not her actions. She wanted someone else to blame, because some people only know how to point the finger outward, never at themselves. "You ruined my life," she whispered through the open door, voice shaking. I kept my voice calm. "You ruined your own life. I just stopped you from ruining someone else's." Her eyes flickered with something sharp and broken. Denial, pride, heartbreak, all mixed into a bitter blend. "If I knew she was your daughter," she muttered again, softer this time, like a regret only half formed. "That's not the point," I replied. "You should treat every child like they matter, not only the ones with powerful parents." Her gaze lowered. She didn't have an answer to that. There was no argument left to hold on to, no rule book to hide behind, no position to protect her. The HOA badge clipped to her jacket looked fragile and ridiculous now, like plastic pretending to be armor. The officer gently closed the door then, not slamming it, just sealing the decision. The sound clicked into the evening like punctuation at the end of a long, exhausting sentence. My daughter tugged on my shirt then, voice tiny. "Daddy, am I in trouble?" I felt my heart twist. "No, sweetheart," I whispered, smoothing her hair. "You did nothing wrong. You never did anything wrong." "She yelled at me," she said, wiping her eyes with her small fist. "And she had a loud thing." My wife kissed her forehead. "That lady was wrong, baby. You are allowed to play. You belong here. Always." The relief in her eyes came slowly, like dawn creeping over a frightened night. She nodded, holding her stuffed cat tighter. "Innocence doesn't understand hatred, but it knows safety when it returns." Parents around us nodded too. Some whispered, "She's brave, and bless her, and she didn't deserve that." Their voices were soft, but they carried weight. Proof that truth lives not in volume but in direction. One final voice rose from behind us, older and steady. It was a retired teacher from the neighborhood, leaning on her cane. She looked at my daughter gently, then at me, then at the patrol car. "She forgot what power is for," the woman said quietly. "What is it for?" someone asked beside her. "To protect," she answered simply. "Always to protect." The words sat in the air like a prayer, a reminder, a lesson. And as the patrol car engine started, its lights flashing back across the playground where children slowly returned to the swings, safety returned too. Not because trouble never touched that ground, but because when it did, someone stood up. A father, a chief, a protector. Not for rules, not for titles, but for a child. Nothing louder than love protects like that. And everyone there saw it. Everyone understood. The patrol car began to roll slowly, almost respectfully, as if even the engine understood that this moment meant something bigger than one arrest. the sound of gravel crunching under tires mixed with quiet whispers from parents who were still gathered, unsure whether to leave or stay in support. The flashing lights painted the neighborhood one last time before the vehicles reached the end of the street. I stayed where I was, holding my daughter. Her tiny arms were wrapped around my neck with all the strength she had, as if letting go meant the world might fall apart again. Her breathing was still quick and shaky, but steadying bit by bit. I felt her heartbeat against my chest, fast but alive, strong, precious. My wife stood close, her hand resting gently on our daughter's back, eyes soft with relief and tired fear still fading from her expression. Parents slowly approached us again, this time with gentle voices, soft questions, quiet support. A few children peeked around their parents' legs, curious but cautious, sensing that something serious had happened, even if they didn't understand it fully. One little girl came forward holding a flower she had picked from the grass. She hesitated, then shyly handed it to my daughter. "For you," she whispered, "because playground is for everyone." My daughter's eyes lifted, still watery, but she managed a tiny nod and held the flower to her chest alongside her stuffed cat. It was a small gesture, but sometimes the smallest kindness feels the biggest after fear has tried to take space in the heart. A man in a gray hoodie approached me next. His voice was low, steady. "Chief, we're glad you were here." He didn't say more, didn't try to pretend he always stood against Karen or understood everything before today. He just said the truth that mattered in that moment. "Thank you." I nodded once. Words weren't necessary. Not every thank you belongs in sentences. Some live in eye contact and shared understanding. A teen girl with curly hair stepped forward too. "She always picked on my brother because he stutters," she said quietly. "We didn't know what to do. But you did." She swallowed and wiped her eyes. I'm glad someone finally stopped her. I looked at the girl, then at the parents around her. They weren't cheering, they weren't celebrating. They were simply realizing, slowly, painfully, that sometimes cruelty grows quietly in familiar places, until one day it shouts loud enough that no one can pretend they don't hear it. My wife knelt beside our daughter again, brushing her hair from her face, wiping the last tears from her cheeks. "Do you want to go home, sweetheart?" she asked softly. Our daughter shook her head just a little. Her fingers tightened around the swing chain nearest her, like she was afraid if she left now, fear would win, and she would never feel brave here again. I understood that feeling. Courage doesn't roar. Sometimes it sits in a small, shaking body on a playground swing and chooses not to leave. I crouched beside her so she could see my eyes. "You don't have to swing right now," I said gently. "But you also don't have to run away. You can take your time. This place is safe. And it's yours too." She sniffed, wiped her nose with the sleeve of her sweater and whispered, "Can you stay next to me, Daddy?" "Always," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." My wife sat beside her on the bench. I stood close, one hand resting on our daughter's wheelchair handle, the other gently squeezing my wife's shoulder. We didn't rush. We didn't force anything. We simply existed there together in the same place where fear had tried to live, replacing it with presence, calm, protection. Minutes passed. Parents slowly returned to swings and slides, keeping their eyes on us, as if they were still standing guard in spirit. Children climbed ladders again, and slid down slides cautiously at first, then with more giggles as normal life crept back in like sunlight returning after thick clouds. A boy with freckles approached shyly, holding a soccer ball. "Do you want to watch us play?" he asked my daughter, voice gentle, unsure if he should have asked. "We can show you a cool trick." She wiped her eyes again, then nodded a tiny little nod. "Okay." He smiled, relieved, and ran back to his friends. They didn't stare or whisper. They simply started kicking the ball around again, making room in their circle without words. Children understand inclusion better than adults sometimes. Their hearts are built without walls until someone teaches them to build one. I watched my daughter's eyes follow the ball, saw her shoulders finally relax, saw her tiny hand loosen around the stuffed cat. She wasn't smiling yet, but she wasn't trembling anymore either. That alone felt like victory. A soft breeze moved through the trees. Leaves rustled gently overhead. The sun dipped lower, turning the playground gold. My wife leaned her head lightly on my arm. We stood there like three pieces of one promise. No fear wins here. Someone might think nothing happened now, Just a family watching their child breathe again, a neighborhood breathing with them. But everything happened. A line was drawn, the truth was seen, and a message settled deep into the ground beneath our feet. Power is not in shouting. Power is not in fear. Power is not in titles or badges held for the wrong reasons. When the patrol cars finally turned the corner and disappeared, the playground felt strangely quiet, like the world had paused to breathe again. The echo of flashing lights still lingered in the air, even though they were gone. The sun hung low now, casting long golden shadows across the slides and swings, softening everything it touched. It felt like a promise that evening would bring peace back, one gentle minute at a time. My daughter's breathing had settled. Her tiny body, once tight with fear, now rested against me gently. She held her stuffed cat in one hand, stroking its fur with small, shaky fingers, like reminding herself she could still feel comfort. Her eyes were still puffy, but calm was beginning to settle there too, fragile but real. My wife brushed her cheeks again and kissed the top of her hair. No words were needed. Sometimes silence heals more than speech ever could. I lifted her carefully and placed her back into her wheelchair, making sure the blanket was tucked around her legs the way she liked it. She looked around slowly, like she was testing the world, checking if danger still hid in corners. But all she saw were parents watching with gentle eyes and children laughing again, some a little quieter than before, but laughing. Hope doesn't always come in loud sounds. Sometimes it returns in tiny giggles and soft whispers on swings. I knelt so we were face to face. Her eyes met mine, and she blinked slowly, as if waking from a bad dream but unsure if it had really ended. "Daddy," she whispered, voice small but steady now. "Is it safe?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said softly. "You are safe. Nothing bad can touch you. Not while I'm here." She touched my cheek with her little hand, like she wanted to make sure I was real. Then she looked at the swing again. It sat where she left it, swaying just a little, like it still remembered her laughter from earlier. Her voice trembled when she spoke again. "Can I still swing?" That question held the weight of everything she felt. It wasn't just about the swing. It was about reclaiming her place. About not letting fear take what joy had built. She wasn't asking for play. She was asking for courage. I smiled softly. "Always. This playground belongs to you too." She stared at me for a second, then leaned forward and wrapped her arms tightly around my neck. Her breath was warm against my shoulder, and her voice was so soft I almost didn't hear it. "Thank you, Daddy." I closed my eyes, holding her just as tight. "Always," I whispered back. "Always." My wife gently pushed the wheelchair toward the swing area again, slowly at first, then more confidently as neighbors smiled and nodded in encouragement. No one avoided us, no one looked away. They watched with respect, some with apology in their eyes for ever letting Karen hold power here, some with admiration that a little girl had shown so much quiet bravery. I sat on the swing beside her and held her wheelchair steady. She didn't swing yet. She just held the rope and traced the metal with her finger, feeling it, claiming it again. The wind brushed her hair softly. The world felt different now, not untouched, but healed in a new way. Children began to play tag again, running across grass and squealing with delight. A boy with freckles waved at my daughter. "Do you want to watch us kick the ball again?" he called. She nodded gently, and I saw the first tiny spark of a smile return to her face. The elderly woman from earlier, the one who understood power better than most, passed by with her cane, giving my shoulder a light squeeze. "Some battles are loud," she murmured, "but the most important ones are quiet and won with presence." Presence. Yes, that was it. Not rage, not fists, not shouting, just standing, staying, protecting, remaining when fear wants you to run. I watched my daughter grip her stuffed cat again and relax into her seat, breathing steady and slow. The horizon glowed orange now, and the air grew cooler. Shadows stretched long, but they weren't frightening. They were peaceful, resting shadows, not threatening ones. I looked around the playground. That slide, those swings, that soft rubber floor, they weren't just play equipment anymore. Today, they became a boundary, a promise, a place where a child learned the world could still be safe, even after being scared. My wife slipped her hand into mine. Her fingers were warm and strong, steady just like her heart. "We handled it," she whispered. "We did," I replied. "And we'll handle anything else that comes." For a moment, I imagined the future. My daughter laughing again without hesitation. Children running beside her, her wheelchair wheels spinning across sidewalks and park paths without fear. Not because the world was perfect, but because she had people who would always stand before the storm reached her. I leaned toward her and kissed her forehead. "No one will ever bully you," I murmured. "No one will ever scare you. Not while I'm here." She closed her eyes and rested her head back, peaceful now. The playground lights flickered on as evening settled in, casting gentle glows across the mulch and slides. Everything looked softer, calmer, like the world was tucking itself in. My daughter didn't know how powerful she was today. She didn't know she had already won. She simply held her stuffed cat and breathed quietly, safe in the arms of evening, safe in the place she reclaimed with courage she didn't even know she had. And as the first star appeared in the sky, I thought one more truth. Being a father isn't just loving your child, it's standing between them and fear. It's turning danger into silence. It's choosing protection over pride every single time. People sometimes think a police chief protects a city, but a father protects a world. The world of one little girl. And that world is everything. Always.